truth. I can't do anything about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow.
Willie Nelson, the red-headed stranger.
Boots still in style from Atlas for wear.
Country music's patron saint of outlaws, the man who turned braids and bandanas into a revolution.
Do you even inspire yourself sometimes?
Oh, I'm amazed, like everybody else, that I get into this much trouble.
With his laid-back demeanor and legendary kindness, Willie seems like the last person to harbor grudges. But behind that peaceful, pot-smoking persona lurked a fierce defender of musical authenticity who could freeze out phonies with surgical precision. While the world saw Willie as everyone's favorite musical uncle, the industry knew him as someone with uncompromising standards and zero patience for artists who betrayed country music's rebel spirit. From Nashville establishment acts who sold out the movement he helped create to rock bands who appropriated outlaw imagery without understanding its meaning. Today, we're exposing the 6 bands that triggered Willie's rarely seen dark side. And the final revelation involves a betrayal so deep it almost destroyed his faith in collaborative music making. This isn't about public feuds. We're talking about quiet wars fought by country music's most principled outlaw. Brace yourself for some surprisingly cold shoulders from America's warmest musical icon. 6. Brooks and Dunn. Starting our exploration, Brooks and Dunn. The country duo whose slick professionalism and corporate backing represented everything Willie fought against in Nashville. Willie's distaste for Brooks and Dunn centered on their calculated approach to outlaw country imagery without any authentic rebellion behind it. He viewed their polished productions and arena-ready anthems as appropriation of the movement he'd helped birth, once privately describing them as outlaws for people who've never broken a single rule. The tension escalated when Brooks and Dunn dominated country radio throughout the 1990s, while genuine rebels struggled for airplay. Willie couldn't stomach how their manufactured edge was being marketed as authentic country rebellion, telling close friends that they represented corporate boardroom decisions disguised as honky-tonk tradition. What particularly needled Willie was their influence on younger country artists who began copying their safe version of rebelliousness. He saw them as responsible for neutering outlaw country's dangerous spirit, describing their success as teaching kids that rebellion is just another marketing strategy. The moment of crystallization came when Kix Brooks made statements about honoring country tradition while playing it safe for mainstream audiences. Willie's response was characteristically understated but pointed. He suggested that real outlaws don't worry about mainstream acceptance, and that Brooks and Dunn's version of rebellion was costume party cowboy for suburban mall shoppers. Willie's dismissal of Brooks and Dunn reflected his belief that authentic country music should challenge the establishment rather than collaborate with it for commercial gain. 5. Rascal Flats. Occupying 5th position, Rascal Flats, whose pop country crossover success and emotional manipulation made Willie question what country music had become.
Yes, smile and shake your head. As if you don't believe.
Willie's bewilderment with Rascal Flats began with their complete abandonment of country music's storytelling traditions in favor of generic emotional appeals. He viewed their highly produced ballads and rock-influenced arrangements as proof that Nashville had lost connection with its authentic roots.
So it was a little embarrassing when I called the guy up and said, well, you need a little help with your career. Let me sing a song with you.
Once describing their approach as greeting card sentiments with country instruments. The frustration deepened when Rascal Flats achieved massive crossover success while traditional country songwriters were marginalized. Willie couldn't understand how audiences embraced what he considered manufactured emotion over genuine artistic expression, telling industry colleagues that they represented focus group country for people afraid of real feelings. What really bothered Willie was Rascal Flats' influence on country radio and their normalization of pop production techniques. He saw them as responsible for erasing the distinction between country and mainstream pop, describing their impact as turning honky-tonks into shopping mall food courts. The breaking point occurred when Gary LeVox made comments about expanding country music's reach and making it more accessible to broader audiences. Willie's reaction was diplomatically phrased but devastating. He argued that country music's power came from its specificity and authenticity, and that Rascal Flats' accessibility came at the cost of everything that made the genre meaningful. Willie's criticism of Rascal Flats embodied his fear that country music was losing its capacity to tell specific, honest stories about real American experiences. 4. Poison. Claiming fourth place? Poison, whose glam metal appropriation of outlaw imagery and party-hardy lifestyle made Willie genuinely angry.
Instead of making love, we both made a separate ways.
Willie's contempt for Poison was rooted in their superficial adoption of rebel aesthetics, without any understanding of what actual rebellion required.
And that song is just kind of infectious. You hear it and you want to hear it again. Yeah, at least I do.
He viewed their bandanas, long hair, and anti-establishment posturing as fashion choices rather than authentic expressions of counterculture values, once describing them as rebels for people who think rebellion means wearing the right outfit. The disgust intensified when Poison achieved mainstream success while actual outlaws faced industry blacklisting and radio boycotts. Willie resented their ability to profit from rebel imagery while avoiding any real consequences for challenging authority, telling friends that Poison represented fake danger for people who want to feel edgy without taking any actual risks. What pushed Willie to open criticism was Poison's influence on younger musicians who began confusing style with substance. He saw them as responsible for commercializing rebellion and reducing authentic counterculture movements to marketing opportunities, describing their success as proof that audiences prefer costume party rebellion to the real thing. The explosive moment came when Bret Michaels made statements about rock and roll's rebellious spirit and the band's connection to outlaw traditions. Willie's response was uncharacteristically sharp. He suggested that Poison's version of rebellion was performance art for people who've never suffered consequences for their beliefs, arguing that real outlaws earned their status through sacrifice rather than stage makeup. Willie's hatred for Poison reflected his belief that authentic rebellion required genuine commitment to challenging unjust authority rather than simply adopting rebel fashion. Third place, Kid Rock, whose genre-blending approach and manufactured authenticity represented everything Willie found dishonest about modern music.
And Jenny Clayton was my first crush, and neither one of us had a clue.
Willie's revulsion toward Kid Rock began with his cynical appropriation of multiple musical traditions without respect for their cultural significance. He viewed rock's combination of rap, country, and southern rock as cultural tourism by someone seeking profit rather than genuine artistic expression, once describing his approach as musical colonialism for people who think mixing genres equals innovation. The antipathy exploded when Kid Rock began positioning himself as a voice of working-class America despite his privileged background. Willie couldn't stomach the manufactured authenticity and false populism, telling industry insiders that rock represented fake blue-collar rebellion for people who've never worked a day in their lives. What really triggered Willie's anger was Kid Rock's appropriation of country music imagery and his claims to represent rural American values. He saw this as particularly offensive cultural theft, describing rock's country phase as suburban rich kid playing dress-up in working-class clothes. The nuclear moment occurred when Kid Rock made statements about representing real America and authentic American music. Willie's reaction was devastating. He argued that rock's version of authenticity was market research disguised as cultural connection, suggesting that his success proved audiences couldn't distinguish between genuine expression and calculated performance. Willie's condemnation of Kid Rock embodied his belief that authentic music required genuine connection to the communities and traditions being represented, rather than strategic appropriation for commercial gain. 2. Big and Rich. Taking the runner-up position, Big and Rich, whose novelty country approach and circus-like performances made Willie question the direction of Nashville's future. Willie's exasperation with Big and Rich stemmed from their transformation of country music into entertainment spectacle rather than authentic expression. He viewed their gimmicky stage shows and novelty songs as proof that Nashville had completely abandoned its storytelling mission, once describing their approach as county fair entertainment masquerading as country music. The irritation peaked when Big and Rich achieved commercial success with their country music without limits philosophy. Willie couldn't understand how their anything-goes approach was being celebrated as innovation rather than recognized as artistic confusion, telling friends that they represented the complete surrender of country music's identity. What particularly disturbed Willie was Big and Rich's influence on country music's artistic standards and their normalization of novelty over substance. He saw them as responsible for convincing Nashville that entertainment value was more important than emotional truth, describing their success as teaching the industry that being weird is more important than being real. The final explosion came when John Rich made statements about breaking down barriers in country music and expanding its creative possibilities. Willie's response was characteristically measured but cutting. He suggested that country music's power came from its traditions and boundaries, and that Big and Rich's approach was chaos disguised as creativity. Willie's dismissal of Big and Rich reflected his belief that authentic country music required respect for established traditions rather than random experimentation for its own sake. Number 1. Hank Williams Jr. S backing band. The most shocking revelation, Willie Nelson's deepest resentment was reserved for Hank Williams Jr. S backing musicians and the session players who enabled what he saw as the complete corruption of Hank Sr.'s legacy. This wasn't primarily about Hank Jr. himself, though Willie certainly had issues with his transformation from authentic country artist to political provocateur.
I thought about Hank Williams Jr., how he's done very well, but he realized too that
The real fury was directed at the professional musicians who facilitated the conversion of Hank Williams Sr.'s tortured genius into party-time anthems and conservative political messaging. Willie's bitterness stemmed from his personal relationship with Hank Sr.'s music, and his horror at watching talented session players reduce that legacy to "Are you ready for some football?" and political rallying cries. He saw these musicians as enablers of cultural vandalism, transforming one of country music's most profound artistic legacies into shallow entertainment. What made this hatred so personal was Willie's knowledge that many of these same players privately acknowledged Hank Sr. as genius, while publicly participating in what Willie considered its systematic degradation. Their willingness to profit from bastardizing a musical saint's work felt like ultimate betrayal of country music's sacred traditions. The breaking point came when Willie realized that Hank Jr.'s band members were actively encouraging his most controversial political statements and helping him weaponize his father's legacy for partisan purposes. This felt like desecration of everything Willie believed country music should represent: universal human experience rather than divisive political messaging. The psychological impact was profound. Willie's disillusionment with these session players contributed to his increasing reliance on his own family band, and his distrust of Nashville's professional music establishment, which he came to see as capable of corrupting any artistic legacy for the right price. Willie Nelson's legendary kindness had its limits when it came to protecting country music's authentic spirit. From corporate sellouts to cultural appropriators, Willie's standards for artistic integrity were higher than his gentle demeanor suggested. Which betrayal of country music's values shocked you most? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories about music's most principled rebels.